We power rank the top 10 non-playoff teams from last season and where we think they'll be in 2023. Here in the Locked On NFL podcast, Chris Carter, Lauren Cox coming at you on a Friday. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast. We're your hosts, Chris Carter and Lauren Cox of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Bears. And we're bringing you the Friday episode. Q's out somewhere chilling on a beach on some vacation where I wish I could be right now, but I'm not as cool as him. So you get us this weekend as a team. And this episode is sponsored by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL and they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler that Lauren Cox is drinking on screen right now. So get your tumbler right now that comes with every order. Do check that out there. We'll have more on Birddogs in a bit. Lauren, we're going to do something fun here that kind of involves both of the teams that we cover. And we're going to power rank the top 10 teams that didn't make the playoffs last year as far as how they look going into this season and where we think they'll finish. We'll start from the bottom, work our way to the top, and then we'll talk about the Tyree Hill situation in a bit here. Lauren, how are things before we get into this? Because we're both probably going to talk about our teams at some point in this list, but I got to get a sense from you. What is the sense of Justin Fields going into year two and what the confidence is year three? What's the confidence here with the Bears?
Yeah, it's year two in this Bears offensive system, which is big for him. Year three in the NFL. Confidence level is definitely high. Expectations are higher for improvement. I don't think people are. I think Bears fans are trying not to do the Jalen Hurts thing and be like, oh, he's got to be Jalen Hurts this year because of the step that he made in year three of his career. But like a good full step below that, like improvement, more consistency in the passing game, and should win some more games. But I think the feeling around the team is like, it would be nice to push for a playoff spot, and maybe they'll be on the fringes of that, but where that ultimately ends up finishing, there's a range of outcomes there, but certainly not going to be, a double-digit win team.
I hear you, Matt. I think that there's some potential for the Bears. Let's waste no more time, though. Let's start getting to our top 10. So what we've done is we took the time before the show to power rank our teams from 10 up to 1. We'll start at 10, get to 1 in the next segment. And go over who we think the top 10 teams are. Lauren, your number 10 team that was a non-playoff team last year is how you see them this year.
I went with the Tennessee Titans, and I know they're still a veteran team in a lot of ways, but they've been kind of doing this shedding a little bit, and I just feel like they're on the decline in a way that I'm so concerned about. I don't feel like they've got much in terms of weapons right now for Ryan Tannehill, that at least enough weapons to buoy a quarterback like Tannehill that needs such a strong supporting cast. I mean, of course, you still got the backfield with Tyree Hill and Derrick Henry, getting ahead of myself, and Tajay Spears. I still they've got pieces there. They're not going to be a terrible team, but I'm just not in love with the direction that they're headed as a franchise. And it just feels like they maybe are more talented than the 10th team here, but it feels like the way that things are kind of trending under Vrabel right now, I'm just not confident that just feels like a team that's going to not implode, but do worse than we might expect this year.
I hear you on that. The Titans certainly they had 7 wins last year, and they've drafted 2 quarterbacks in the last 2 seasons. Will Levis has not done well in camp, according to sources inside their camp, and Malik Willis apparently they've already moved on from. So with those investments, it's not looking too great for a few things there for Tennessee. We'll get to them more later because I have them a little bit higher on my list. But I went with number 10 with some of your friends, the Packers. I put them there because I know that they have talent on their roster, but I'm not a Jordan Love believer. And I haven't been. I thought I found it peculiar when they picked him when they did. I haven't. The one time we've seen him, I wasn't impressed. I feel like this is going to be a rough year for Green Bay. I think they'll be able to hang in there. They'll be able to compete because they do have talent on their roster. But I think that they're at the bottom of this list simply because I don't think that he's going to be able to do enough to carry them.
Call it a bias, but I was trying to decide between the Packers and the Titans for this 10th spot, and I left Green Bay off my list. So they did not correct that. They were
I'm telling Peter. I'm telling Peter.
Oh, Peter will let me have it. Don't worry, he always will. But, similarly, I felt like Aaron Rodgers was holding so much of that team together, and I don't think Jordan Love can in the same way.
I feel you. We'll move on to our number 9 teams here. My number 9 team is your squad, the Chicago Bears. I think Justin Fields and them, they'll be able to hang in there a little bit. I still think there's some coalescing that needs to happen in Chicago, but I do feel like they'll take a step up this year. I just don't know how far of a step up it'll come this year.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? It's like they're good. They have to be better. There's no way they're going to be worse than they were last year. But is that 6 wins? Is that 9 wins? Somewhere in between? Like, yeah, there's quite a range of outcomes there, and it all depends on the step that Justin Fields takes. They're definitely a big wild card in this. That they could be a team picking in the top 10 of the draft again, and they could be a surprise playoff team. And that's as volatile of a range of outcomes as most teams on this list. My number 9 is the Atlanta Falcons. I know they're building up some playoff hype here, and people are fired up about some of the progress that they've made around the team, but not a big Desmond Ridder believer. And like, as much as I do like Bijan Robinson, I don't know that he's going to like be the thing that opens up and unlocks their offense completely. Like, it's still at the end of the day comes down to the quarterback spot. And I still feel like that defense is kind of a weird mix of like old guys and then like young guys. And there's sort of this middle class that's needed to sort of coalesce things there. And again, like, I don't think they're going to be terrible by any means, but I'm just not super confident in them taking this big step forward. I think it'll be a little more slow and steady.
I hear you on that. Let's move up to number 8 here. Who's your number 8 squad that you have listed?
The New England Patriots.
You
haven't reacted to all these picks. I'm like,
This is interesting.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, I still feel like with Bill Belichick, there's a certain level of like, they're going to be all right, right? They're never going to just like completely fold when they have enough sort of that consistency there. And I know I certainly have my own questions about Mac Jones and with Bailey Zappi behind him, but I feel like they can figure out some things there. They added a little bit more at the receiver position. Like, I feel like and of course, defensively, you can get some. I really like their draft with Christian Gonzalez and Keon White. Like, I feel like those are guys that could be big time difference makers right away in their careers. And I feel like there's just enough improvement there that like things are trending in a good direction for them. I like them around this spot.
I feel you there. My number 18 is the Denver Broncos. And partially because I think Sean Payton will do a better job of putting this team on the right track. I still don't think that they're a supreme contender by any means. I think Russell Wilson will have a better year, but I like a lot of the pieces that they've added. I like their secondary. I like like different parts of their team right now. I still think they still have a long way to go before they're a whole team, and I think that they get kind of to where people thought they would be when they added Russell Wilson. But I still think that they'll find a way to be interesting here and compete, and maybe be in that 7 to 9 win range by the end of the season with how things go. Speaking of 7, we get to our number 7 team. This will be the last thing we hear before we go to the break. Who's your number 7 squad?
I put my Chicago Bears right here
ahead
of the Patriots and Falcons. They beat the New England Patriots last season. That was one of the 3 teams that they actually did beat last season. And I feel like, again, Bears getting better. Other teams also trying to get better, but from where they were. And I feel like, like this is the right spot for me where like probably not going to be like a big time playoff push here, but improved enough to feel like they can be better than some of those teams below them, and that Fields will raise them up enough to win a few more games this season and the improvements. But like you said, I think it's going to take, the Bears are really a team that's building for 2024. Like, this year is about progress. Next year is about really trying to hit it hard. And so we'll see progress, and they'll be a better team, but not like drastically better.
I hear you on that. My number 7 team, not too far geographically from Chicago, but the Cleveland Browns.
7.
I think that here's the thing, man. I know we're supposed to believe in Deshaun Watson and all this stuff. I wasn't believing too much of what I saw last year. I was like, they weren't putting it together. And the other thing is that when you look at their roster, they didn't get to add much. I mean, their first round draft pick was like a late third, or their first draft pick was a late third rounder this year because of the Deshaun Watson trade. Their salary cap hamstrung. I think they're in a position where they're not going to get much better than last year. I think that Deshaun Watson, maybe he's better at times, but I still think, and I've said this for years about the Browns, the problem isn't necessarily always just the players that are on the Browns. It's the organization itself. It's been defunct. It's been not good. They'll have a moment here or there where they spike up and they look really strong and everyone buys in. The Browns are going to be it, and then they fall apart, and then everyone's like, well, how did that happen? They're the Cleveland Browns. They do it all the time, and they're going to do it again this year. I still rank them at 7 because I think that they have enough talent on their roster to be troublesome. Like, I think that they're going to split with a lot of teams in the AFC North, but I also think that throughout the season, they're going to have so many of those games. They're like, how did they lose that one? Why did they lose it? And at the end of the day, you just go back and you say, it's Cleveland. That's why it happened. We'll get to our top 6, finishing out our list here of our top 10 non-playoff teams from the 2022 season as we head into 2023. But first, before we do anything else, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Birddogs. Birddogs, of course, is the clothing line here that's here to make you look good. They use stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer on you through the thigh and the leg and give you a truly sculpted look. Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. Lauren's sporting them here for you on camera if you're watching this on YouTube. And they fit better than regular shorts, and they aren't made of the stiff restricted cotton, because now Birddogs fix the issue of some of that restrictive cotton by inserting this cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any movement. And that is so huge, especially in the summertime when you're trying to be out and active. Birddog also, with the summertime, has an anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So to get your pair of Birddog shorts, go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl. When you make your order, you'll get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. Back here in the Locked On NFL podcast, Chris Carter and Lauren Cox on the Friday edition, talking all things NFL. We're breaking down our top 10 non-playoff teams from last year and how we rank them here. We now enter our top 6 after listing 10 through 7. Lauren, recap for our listeners who your 10 through 7 were, and then give us your number 6 team.
So from the bottom up, Titans, Falcons, Patriots, Bears. And I go New Orleans Saints here. I feel like I believe in Derek Carr, I think, more than a lot of people in terms of, I think, nationally, and certainly people in New Orleans are feeling like the playoffs are there. But I like the weapons that they have there. I feel like the offensive line is good for Carr. Like, Carr needs a little bit of a supporting cast, and it feels like, well, it's not like a top 5 group in the NFL as far as non-playoff teams goes. Like, it's enough to sort of have that consistency at the quarterback position elevate the Saints enough. And they're still, I know, like, their defense lost a little bit, and I definitely have some concerns there, especially up front in the pass rush. But there's enough there for me that I feel like this team is just like right here in the middle of like top 10, top 6-ish feels right for them.
I hear you on that. I have the Saints in a similar location, not at 6, but coming up soon. I have the Colts at 6.
The Colts,
and that's a bold claim, right?
Yeah.
But hear me out. I have a think here. My looking at the Colts, a big part of the problem last year was the quarterback situation and how they didn't have any basis for who they were. Jonathan Taylor fell off the map. Quentin Nelson was even underperforming. I think that there was just across the board, they just failed in a lot of respects, and they gave up mid-season, and we're kind of like, we just need to hit the reset button. I think this year is a good reset button for them. I'm not sure if they make the playoffs this year, but I feel like they're going to catch some people off guard because their running game is going to be not all the way back, but better than it was last year. And I think that Anthony Richardson, if he gets in and he does start, I think that he does enough at the quarterback position to say, like, hey, we have at least a balanced attack here. They can do enough on defense to hang in there. And I also think it benefits with another team I'm going to talk here soon, but I also think it benefits that they're in the AFC South, because the Texans aren't going to be that good. You talked about the Titans. The Jaguars, I think, took a step up, but I'm curious to see, can they build any consistency? And I think the Colts might be able to benefit from being in such a topsy-turvy division there. That's why I put them at 6. But who's your number 5? Oh, no, go ahead. You had a thought there.
I was just say, first-year raw quarterback prospect is it's a lot of expectations on him to come in and be the difference maker. And I feel like there's going to be some mistakes there too, but I do really like Shane Steichen as a head coach. I think he's a good coach with Jim Bob Cooter as offensive coordinator. So if anybody can do it,
Jim Bob Cooter, one of the greatest football names of all time. But Lauren, give us your 5th ranked team here, because now we're in the top 5, and this is when it starts to get really interesting.
This is where I go with Denver Broncos, and I'm hesitant on them. I really am. This one was a tough spot to try and figure them out, but I do think Sean Payton coming in can figure some things out with Russell Wilson in a way that it's not going to be, Super Bowl Russell Wilson by any means. But I think the amount he underachieved last season was even more so than just like age and getting older. Like, I think he was worse. Like, there's some overcorrection to now come back. So regression to the mean to where he will be better. And they've got all the free agent money they went out and spent. Like, the offensive line should be better. They still got all the good weapons at receiver. Plus they added Marvin Mims in the draft. And I feel like defensively they added some nice pieces up front. Like, yeah, they've kind of done some transition here and there, but I still think if that team can stay healthy, they can do a little more damage than we saw last year.
I hear you on that. I hear you that entirely. The Broncos at 5. And I like the Broncos. I just put them further down because I don't believe in them just yet based off what I saw. But I do think there's a chance that they could creep up into that conversation. My number 5 team, though, the New Orleans Saints. And partially because I do think them getting Derek Carr, them getting adding him, I think he's not going to fix everything. I think he's going to balance stuff out. And I think there's enough talent on the Saints roster that they will be able to be a problem. And again, a similar situation I was talking about with the Colts, they're in the NFC South, which is a worse division. And I feel like they're going to be able to come in and say, hey, you know what? They might even sweep the whole division with how bad the Bucs look, how bad the Panthers look, and how bad who else is in the NFC South right now. And I'm blanking on them. I always do this. The 4th team I forget.
Bucs, Panthers, Saints, Falcons.
Falcons. I'm sorry. I'm not a Ritter fan either. So I'm just like, I don't see it there. So, but that's why the Saints will beat teams that I don't even remember exist sometimes there in the NFC South. But that's why I have them at number 5. All right. Number 4, final 4 of the teams that you think. And I think this is where we start getting the range of teams that we actually think could make the playoffs for this time around.
This is maybe where I break your heart, Chris, because I put the Pittsburgh Steelers here at 4.
You dog.
How
dare you? You insult
my
family. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, like I like the Steelers. I'm a biased big fan of a couple of their draft picks there, Nick Herbig and Keanu Benton, both great human beings in addition to great football players. Like I think that defense is
Wisconsin man, are you?
What?
Wisconsin man, are you?
Alum for sure. And
there you go.
Keanu Benton went to my high school.
So wait, basically you're picking like Pittsburgh is Wisconsin now. They have TJ Watt. They've got Keanu Benton. They even have Isaiah Loudermilk on top of Herbig, and you're going to put them at 4? Next time I go to the locker room, I'm going to say, hey, Lauren Cox, fellow Wisconsin alum, hates you guys, and I'll see how they like it.
Keanu Benton went to my high school. He's from my hometown. Like I've met his parents. Like we're not like cool. Best friends, but like, yeah. So please do tell him. I'd really appreciate that. No, but to me, honestly, like it's a little bit of a Pickett thing. Like I think Pickett's good. Like it's not like he's bad, but like to take that next step, like I need to see him take over a little bit more and to really kind of show some like next level quarterbacking. And I still want to see a little bit more of that from him.
Okay. All right. We'll get to the Steelers in a bit because I haven't named them on my list just yet. But my number 4 team here, I'm going with the Tennessee Titans. Wow. And I'm going with them because I think that they're going to stick with Ryan Tannehill, and I think that he's going to just do solid enough. And I think that they're a team that still with Derrick Henry, they'll still be able to run the ball. And here's the thing: the Colts. I think it's going to be the Colts or the Titans that become that second AFC South team that just becomes problematic for the Jaguars to figure out. And the Jaguars still being a young team, I think it's one of those 2 teams are going to be. That's why I put them at 4 and 6 because I think that one of those 2 teams is going to take advantage. The Texans, I know that they got their new quarterback and everything. I'm sorry, they're going to take some time to develop. They're going to be swept by the division, I think, and they might steal one game from somebody. But I feel like the Titans still have something to say here before they completely fall apart. But I do agree with you that they don't have much longer before they do fall apart. And Mike Vrabel's experiment here is going to stop working because I think they've kind of missed their window with their opportunity to make a big strike. But all right, your number 3 team here of non-playoff teams.
Going with the Detroit Lions here. I think.
Whoa.
Okay. I think they're a regression candidate. I think they're a team that may end up doing worse this year than they did last year. Like they're still going to be good, but I think Jared Goff got away with some stuff last season that statistically is likely to come back down a little bit. Plus, they're missing players from the gambling issues, and I think they're just like they certainly like improved in a lot of different areas. And that's why they're still number 3 on my list, but just not like I think they're a hot team that everyone thinks is going to be like the next playoff team for the team that's going to make the playoffs. I think maybe, but I'm not quite as bullish on them. But maybe that's an NFC North bias too.
No, I feel you. It's funny because they're my number 3 team. I think that like I'm not a big what's the coach's name? Danny, what's his face? Or
Campbell. Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell. I'm not a big Dan Campbell guy. Neither is Q because we talking about him a lot. The whole biting kneecaps thing, I'm just like, sorry, man, I don't buy into it. But I do buy into some of the talent that they've added, and then I think that they can be a competitive team. I don't think that they go too far this year. I think that they're also in a weak division where you kind of have the Vikings, who I think overperformed last year, and we'll see how they do without Dalvin Cook. You have the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, the Bears, who I think, like we were just talking about, I think the reason I put the Bears on my list is I think they can take advantage of an NFC North that's kind of doesn't have a king right now. And but but that's also where I think the Lions could sneak their way in. I mean, they won the last ever game that Aaron Rodgers played as a Green Bay Packer, and that I know plenty of Lions fans. I have plenty of friends from Detroit, and they were just like, that was just the best thing ever. It was like, yeah, sure, we didn't make the playoffs or nothing, but we just loved seeing him go out the tunnel. And then now those Packers fans will never get to enjoy it. And I was like, geez, you guys have issues. But we do. Lawrence, like, as a Chicago guy, we do. But I feel like the Lions will be in a position to compete in a weaker division and make some good statement games here and there. But I'm with you that I'm still not sure that Jared Goff is going to be the answer in the long run. All right, we're down to our final two. Who is your number 2 non-playoff team?
This is where I put the Cleveland Browns, and I think that the difference
smoking right now. I can't believe you.
The main difference I think between you and I there is just level of faith in Deshaun Watson returning to previous Deshaun Watson form. I do feel like now with a full like regular offseason and a full training camp, full regular season to like get through everything with this team, like there's a lot better chance that he maybe isn't as great as he once was, but like is still pretty good. I like the weapons that they have around him. I still think that defense has a lot to like about it. And I just think supporting cast plus pretty good young quarterback that's still ascending. I think they're going to be good, even though I won't certainly be rooting for him.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'm sorry. I look at this team and I think that like you're the team that was getting smoked by Kenny Pickett at the end of last season. I mean, smoked 28-14, wasn't even close. Steelers were like clowning him at the end of the game. And I'm just like, and again, that was a Steelers team that had a rookie quarterback, was still figuring things out. And again, when I just look at the, like they got Zadarius Smith, which is a good replacement for Jadeveon Clowney, but we'll see how he does in their system. I like some of their corners. I like Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. I think Grant Delpit is kind of meh. I think Juan Thornhill is a decent safety. I liked him coming out of college, and I liked what he did with Kansas City. But I look at how this defense, like I think Myles Garrett is a great talent and all, but the Steelers have found a way to neutralize him for the past several years. And just like I look at that, and I think that all in all, like this offense really needs to click in ways that it has not. And I get that Deshaun Watson, he could make that that rise up and be kind of who we started to see more of Houston 4 years ago. How long has it been since we've seen him play? And that's where I'm at. It's like Nick Chubb is the best player. Like Nick Chubb to me is the best part of this. If the offensive line can kick butt and get him going, this Browns team can be dangerous. But as it stands, I think that enough teams will take the runaway, and I don't think that the passing game will do enough. But you have them as number 2. My number 2 team here, the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers adding to this team. They're extremely talented this year. But I have a caveat here, Lauren. I feel like this could be very Russell Wilson-ish, but even worse because I think Aaron Rodgers, if things start to go wrong in New York, Aaron Rodgers will not take any of the blame. He'll just kind of be like, this isn't my fault, and the Jets will be scrambling around. Robert Saleh is going to be there. It's going to create a sort of division within the team when Aaron Rodgers is kind of being Aaron Rodgers in the bad moments. If they don't have bad moments, if they're like 12-5 next year, they'll be fine. And I think that they'll watch. But if they get to a point where like by like week 9, they're like 5-4, 4-4, something like that, and there's questions, what's wrong with the Jets? Aren't they supposed to be taking over? I think that could cause some rifts in a young team that has an old quarterback that kind of does his own thing. But I still think the talent definitely there. I think if they're able to find their franchise quarterback of the future, the Jets could be a very serious problem for the next decade or so in the AFC.
See, they're my number 1 team. And I think, again, it's the Aaron Rodgers thing. Like I've seen Aaron Rodgers make more with less in Green Bay than he's got in New York here. I still feel like, again, like some pretty solid wide receivers for him. The offensive line is it certainly good enough for Aaron Rodgers. And I think that defense still has a lot of great pieces. Like they felt like a quarterback away last season. And when you replace that quarterback away with Aaron Rodgers, it feels like, okay, like that's rubber stamped playoff team this year.
I feel you. It's hard to argue with that there as far as the talent that's been added to them and what they're going to be able to do. So I go to my number 1 team, and it should be no surprise to anyone out there about who I have not mentioned so far and how I couldn't believe that you would just speak with such hate in your heart for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in all seriousness, I do think the Steelers will be the best non-playoff team coming out this year. Here's the thing. The Steelers were the number 1 non-playoff team last year. They were 9-8, barely missed the playoffs because of a tiebreaker last year, and they missed TJ Watt for 2 whole months. If he plays any one of the Dolphins game, the Patriots game, the Jets game, and there's a couple others in the first Ravens game, they win those games because they've shown when he's on the field and he's healthy, they're a problem. He's like Troy Polamalu of the 2008-ish, 2010-ish Steelers, where when he was on the field, that defense was the best in the league. You couldn't do much with it. When he was off the field, they were very mid, and you could take advantage of them, and you needed Ben Roethlisberger to go off. But I think that defense will be back up to top stuff there. I think Patrick Peterson is getting along very well with Joey Porter Jr. in the cornerback room that they're developing there. Minka Fitzpatrick's still the best safety in football. Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi, a really great 1-2 punch. Alex Highsmith, who had 14.5 sacks, now bookends with a healthy TJ Watt there. That defense is going to be a problem. But here's where I think that you truly messed up, Lauren. You don't know about Kenny Pickett. I covered Kenny Pickett in college. And let me tell you, when he started making plays the second half of the season, and some people were like, oh, I didn't know he could do. This is who this guy is. He is a ridiculous student of the game. He studies religiously. He is all about the team, and he's been all about film focus, improving himself. And that's why you saw Kenny Pickett. Yeah, in the first several games of the season, he threw like 8 interceptions in his first like 6 appearances. But in the last few games of the season, he threw 1 interception. I think the second half of the season after the bye week. And in that stretch, they went, I think it was 6-2. I think it was in that stretch there. And the one game they lost to the Bengals, 30-37. And the one game was the Ravens game when he got knocked out of it because of an injury. And I think what we saw last year from Kenny Pickett was a guy who could make the clutch plays and the clutch moments and the clutch reads, and he's a guy that has great touch. And I think that this year you're going to start to see him put together things that he was starting to figure out at the end of the season. He's not going to be elite. He's not going to be like top 10 quarterback or anything like that, but I think he's going to be like above the middle of the pack in the NFL this year, and that'll be just enough for what the Steelers have added to their offensive line and for what the Steelers are getting back on defense to make them a playoff team this time around, where I think that they, again, of all these teams that we listed, I like their chances to take a step up because they were right there a year before without losing the best defensive player in football.
But of all those teams they beat in that late winning streak, one of them made the playoffs, I think, because it was what? Colts,
I hear that.
Panthers, Raiders, Browns, and then they beat the Ravens with a playoff team. But it's a lot of teams picking in the top 5 and top 10 of the draft that they were beaten down the stretch there.
Hey, I hear that entirely, but they also beat the Bengals last year, and they were a team that was able to figure some things out. And again, I think that you look back at last year, if they have TJ Watt at the right times in an accident that this guy has been healthy for pretty much his entire career except that season, I think that they're taking a lot of those teams that they lost to. And again, they are a playoff team, but we'll see what they do this year. We got to talk about the Tyree Hill situation in a minute here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, Lauren Cox. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, Lauren Cox. We wanted to talk about the Tyree Hill situation. It's tough to go over, what might happen with Tyree Hill with this situation. We know about the situation where he had domestic violence allegations from the mother of his children, and we saw how that played out years ago. But now this new situation that is sparked up is now over a marina incident in Miami where apparently there was a person that was working there that was trying to tell Tyreek Hill's hunting crew that they couldn't go after a certain type of water animal. And that led to an argument, and that the claim, according to these allegations, is that Tyree Hill struck this person in the back of the head. No serious injuries, but still an assault/battery situation. And it seems like he's going to be charged with I think the charges have been made of battery and assault on Tyree Hill. But the question then becomes, what comes of this, Lauren? Because Tyree Hill now has a history, and now you have an incident of violence that we still got to go through and see what actually happens here. But this is a bad look for a guy who's a key piece to a Dolphins team that I think a lot of people are expecting to take a serious step up this year. Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's like in a vacuum on paper, it's like, okay, NFL wide receiver slaps an employee in the back of the head. If this wasn't Tyreek Hill, would this be a big deal? Probably not. I mean, we certainly wouldn't be talking about it right now if it wasn't such a premier player. So it's like, I feel like on one hand, it's like, okay, is this that big of a deal? But like you said, like given the history of, off the field trouble there, and given that there's a violence aspect in both ways, all of a sudden there's a precedent here that makes this more serious and makes it more, just more of a concern because it starts to become a pattern, even if it's just sort of the quote unquote the official second time he's been investigated in this sort of way, but like it makes you wonder if there have been other incidents that haven't been investigated, or if there's been other acts of violence, or if there's been other just ways that he struggles to deal with maybe anger or emotions in some of these situations. If there's the risk for maybe further things happening in the future, like all because of the history here behind it for Tyree Hill. So that's why, like, yeah, in some ways I'm like, well, okay, he hit the guy in the back. Like I'm picturing like, the little slap, like, like your brother.
We don't know how serious this was.
Yeah. Like, so like, we don't know exactly what it looked like. I mean, but it's Tyree Hill. And at the end of the day, like that's something that has to be carried with him through all these conversations. And I think something we were worried about, when he goes to Miami, a place of nightlife, a place of a lot of fun and excitement and partying and stuff, whether that something like this could come up. And he made it this far before even a very minor incident like this. So maybe things are trending in the right direction more generally for him.
I'm in the position where I'm just like, man, like if I'm the Dolphins management, I'm like, Tyreek, you got to avoid everything. Because like you said, this could be much ado about nothing. This or much ado about something very slight where he's like, but he has to remember he is a target. Just like any NFL player, when you're out and about, someone knows that you make a lot of money. You're a celebrity, you're easily recognizable, and people know that if you mess up, it can mean a lot more to you than it does to them. And I think if you're in that situation, especially when you have a history where you've been in the news and it's impacted your career before, you cannot afford to allow yourself to be even close to those situations. And I know that that's tough sometimes, because sometimes you're just living your life, you're going out and you're doing things, you're having fun, and then something might happen that catches you off guard and you just respond poorly. But that's where Tyreek Hill has to keep it under control. And I look at this Dolphins team. We talked about non-playoff teams, but as far as teams that barely made the playoffs, I think that the Dolphins are in a position to make a big rise up in the AFC East, especially because I'm not so sure the Bills are going to be top tier this year with how they've looked. And I think that their window might be closing as far as striking at this part of Josh Allen's career with the roster that they have. And the team that could maybe overtake them could be the Dolphins. But if Tyreek Hill isn't there, remove all of that, because he is such a big piece of that. And I think the Dolphins, they can't afford to lose this guy, even if it's for like a 4-game suspension or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the concern, right? Because like if this was any other wide receiver, we wouldn't be concerned about a suspension necessarily from a
right.
Maybe a fine or maybe at most like a 1-game sort of like slap on the wrist, like, hey, don't get in trouble for assault or battery. But because it's Tyree Hill, it's like, okay, is there a previous sort of track record, like the level of offense increases as a sort of a repeat offender in that way? Although technically the previous offense happened before he was in the NFL, but regardless, like there's a sort of conduct detriment of the league, and the perception that does the team or the league need to come down harder on Tyreek Hill because of that, and does that lead then to a greater chance of him missing time or having some sort of impact larger than most other players would have from this? But to your point, like for the Dolphins, like you take 1,700, and over the course of a season, 1,700 yards out of this offense, like that's a third of their passing offense that just goes right through Tyree Hill, if not a little more than that. Like the math on yards like that becomes difficult. Obviously, he's not going to miss a whole season, so you're not taking off a full season's worth of yards. But even for like a handful of games, missing a third, almost half of their passing offense through one player. Like, sure, Jalen Waddle is great, and there's a lot to like about Waddle, but they don't have Mike Gesicki anymore. The tight end position is much more of a blocking style in that offense. So like if you're missing Tyreek Hill for even a game, you're throwing to Waddle and Braxton Berrios and Raheem Mostert out of the backfield, but it's really not a lot to be super fired up about. So it's certainly not for an extended period of time.
I do think that's the big concern there. A lot of people holding their breath there in Miami right now about what that situation will be like. We'll see what happens here with Tyreek Hill as that case takes its progress forward, and we'll keep you up to date here on the Locked On NFL podcast through all of our hosts throughout the week. Lauren, thanks so much for joining me here on the Friday episode and filling in for Q. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, of course. You can hear me on the Locked On Bears podcast all off season long. Blue shirt gang with me and Chris today on the YouTube. We matched without even coordinating there, so that was fun. But yeah, and of course on Twitter at Cox Sports 1.
Absolutely. Find him there and all his great Bears coverage with the Locked On Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Also host the Locked On Steelers podcast, which you can find Locked On NFL and Locked On Bears Monday through Friday. Daily episodes, your favorite podcasting apps, and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel to get our NFL channels as well as all of our channels for your favorite team. You can also find me at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover all things Pitt athletics, post-gazette.com for that. And you can also find me at Carter Critiques on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks again for everyone for checking us out. Back next week, checking out and see what other crazy things have happened in the NFL, and maybe we got some other crazy top 10 rankings that we'll go through.